Welcome to Eric Bunk's Vintage Sportsman.
Hello, welcome to Eric Bunk's Vintage Sportsman. Today we're going to have a hunter education film made, and this is for all you super beginning hunters that are just starting out. This is one of those videos where, you know, just from the raw beginnings, like I don't know anything about hunting, show me what to do. So that's why I'm just trying to go over these safety tips, because a lot of people, it's hard, you know, we're trying to find a resource where you can go and just see some of the basics. So that's what we're going to discuss today. So if you have somebody you know that never hunted, doesn't know anything about, you know, bow hunting and things like that. I mean, we're going to go over guns and things too, but there's a lot of gun safety classes you can take and things. But this is mainly for bow hunting right now, and just some basic safety tips. And this is what I recommend. This may not be what other hunters recommend. I'm just going over some basics, my opinions, and if you're someone out there that has a friend that wants to start hunting, you may review this video and you may pick it apart and say, well, I'll do it this way. And you know, this isn't something set in stone. This is just a couple of my ideas, but I'm sure you guys have your own. But this is how I would start. So come on along, we'll show you a couple of things that I think are pretty important, and mistakes that I made over the years, you know, just things that you got to kind of watch out for in the deer woods. So stay tuned and come on along. Hello, just before I start this video, I want to mention something that I failed to mention in the video. When walking with a firearm, there are some situations where I talked about walking up a hill and in some uneven terrain. Those are situations where you could or should unload the firearm, like crossing a fence or doing any kind of, you know, climbing over something of any way. If you're climbing a rock wall, or if you're walking where it's, like I said, up a hill where it was slippery. I made some, you know, references in there, but you could unload that gun and you still treat it as if it were loaded. Treat every gun as if it were loaded, but you know, you can take the option which is smartest to unload that firearm, make sure everything is clear. In this way, in any situation, you are safe. So I didn't bring that up in parts of the video, so I wanted to make that known. So enjoy the video. Be safe out there. Now here's a number one prime example. Where I live, there is a lot of mountain terrain. And I'm using this as an example. It can be, but you notice you have houses down there below this hill. And when you're bow and arrow hunting, especially from the ground, you may be still hunting or anything, you need to watch the direction you're firing that arrow. Even though you may be firing it towards the ground, I've already shot an arrow that I thought was pretty way up high, and it deflected from a tree and then shot up in the air. Now that could be dangerous. It could land down by those houses if it does the right way. So I always try to not shoot down anywhere towards homes, which is obvious, you know, painfully obvious. You know, I'm not trying to, you know, try to state things that, you know, obviously you don't know, but you would know. But it's just, don't think, you know, an arrow can travel quite far, and I'm talking even with a recurve bow. So it can deflect, it can glance off the side of a tree and then shoot way up in the air. I mean, it's so when you're looking at terrain and you want to fire, try to think about that, you know, because that's super dangerous. I had that happen once, and lucky it didn't go far enough and I found the arrow. But just look at your terrain and try to always know, just like with a gun, know your shot and beyond. Know where you're shooting and beyond. So that's a number one tip there, especially in this hilly terrain. And it can go for flat terrain too. I mean, you know, anywhere where you're shooting, just know the direction you're shooting, and that's the first basic of hunting. Know where that arrow's going. Now, I know a lot of young hunters, you may not have a recurve or longbow. You may decide to hunt with a compound. Just for me, what I would recommend is your first year or two, unless you're real well versed in tree stands, is to go on the ground first. I think it'll make you a better hunter, and I just think your skill set will improve. You'll be used to being around the animals more, and it'll definitely build you up as a better hunter. Now, not putting down tree stands, I don't like heights, but my way of thinking is you can shoot probably easier on the ground and make a easier killing shot as a new hunter, and you could really get eye level with those deer, and it's exciting, and then once you move on, then you have to be well versed in tree stand safety. Wear your safety harness at all times. Never carry your bow up with you. If you're on a ladder stand, you always bring it up with a rope. Always tie yourself in, and make sure that you have a good body harness system if you are going to use a tree, to where if anything collapsed or anything fell you wouldn't be choked or anything. That's why these new safety harnesses are so important, because they hold your whole body. They're like they've come so long. It's a long way since when I started hunting in the 80s. So that's a good tip if you're going to hunt from the trees. But I say get on the ground. Build ground blinds, get up close with these deer and get used to seeing them up close, and that buck fever, and enjoy that feeling. And then when you go for trees, you got to be careful. Like I said, just make sure you really, really watch what you're doing, because you can get hurt even from you don't have to be more than 5 feet off the ground to get hurt. I mean, you can, especially when you get to my age, no matter what you do, you get hurt. But no, seriously, you don't have to be high in the tree in order to get hurt. So that's what I would do, and just start that way, and that would be a good way to start out with this way, and you get your practicing down. I would spend at least a year, whatever it takes for you to get comfortable with your equipment in shooting all different angles through brush and everything. That's why I say go out. That's why I like the recurves, because I can go out in a patch of woods like this with a recurve with a blunt tipped arrow, and I could practice just like in a hunting scenario, not just on a target range, where I could pick out stumps along a trail, soft targets, and shoot just like I'm in the deer woods. Or bring your deer target with you and put it behind some brush or something and practice that way. This way you're actually creating a hunting situation. So that's another tip to start out with. And YouTube, like I said, it's got a lot of videos. Just learn about the deer patterns. But the main thing we're focused on here is safety. And when you're starting out, and also practicing your bulky hunting clothes. Nothing, you could be in the summertime and shooting everything great, but when you put on your bulky hunting clothes and it's cold and your arms are stiff and your muscles are sore and stiff, you're going to shoot different. So that's something you really got to be careful of. And another thing you got to watch is ticks. Now there's a lot of educational videos out there on ticks, and remember, they could ruin your day. But if prevention is the key. When you're walking, try not to scrape up against any brush, because they'll sit on the edge of the brush, and when you scrape up against, that's when they put their little antennas out there, whatever, their feet, or the feet, their legs, whatever, those little tick legs, and they stick you on the end, and they will latch onto you. So, but yeah, beginner, just make it simple. Don't try to get the biggest buck in the woods your first year. Just be happy with shooting a small buck or a doe, and just get your feet wet and get out there and have fun. But just safety in mind. You just got to be aware of your surroundings. If a gun season is open while you're hunting, make sure when you're walking in the woods you have a flashlight with you. There's nights where it's a full moon and I can go in early in the woods and get to my blind, but if somebody else is in that woods and they're not a responsible person like we all are, it could end bad. So you want to make sure you don't want to obviously spook the deer, but you want to try to put something where you can put that out that you're a human if another hunter was out there. And I said, I don't know if there's any states where the gun season and archery overlap. I know in New Jersey you can hunt during the shotgun season with a bow if you have both licenses. So just be well aware there's other people in the woods, and just be aware and making yourself look like a person to them, just so you can broadcast a little bit, and be aware of your surroundings. So that's a good tip for you. Here's another tip for you. I'm just filming around my home area where there's some hiking trails, and that's one thing you got to watch out for too. People will be hiking these fire roads and things, so be well aware that people will be using the woods too besides yourself. So, be very cognizant of that, and make sure you identify your target. And with bow hunting, you relatively have to be close anyway, so most of the time. But in low light conditions, your eyes play tricks on you, and you want it to be a deer. But just remember, there's people around woods hiking, especially on a beautiful fall day. People love to be in the woods just like we do. So, and now here's that example again. See the way it goes over that hill. And now look at all this craggy brush that could deflect an arrow very easily. And it could fly up in the air and potentially land down near those houses down there. So, even though you're within the safety zone or beyond it, if you have a high-powered compound bow, well, not high-powered, you know what I mean. You need the modern compound, shall I say, or a crossbow. That's another thing. You want to be well aware of what's down below you, and any kind of deflection that could make that crossbow bolt or that arrow deflect. So, know your target and beyond. I will say that over and over again. That is very important. And now here, as you go up the hill, because you're on a bench here, if you were hunting on top of that hill, it'd be a little nicer because your arrow would kind of land down this way, but it still poses a little bit of a danger if you're not shooting on a downward angle. If somebody's hiking through here and you can't see and you miss, somebody might not take the trail. They may just be hiking through the woods in general. So just be cognizant about what's around you and make sure that you are just very safely shooting, and that's super important. We're out here to have fun and not make sure nobody gets hurt. Now, I'm sorry to say I'm not well versed in modern tree stands, so depending on what kind of tree stand, if you're going to use one that you have, one thing you got to watch out for is the bark on these trees. If it gets rainy and icy, and this bark is icy, if you have a climbing stand, how much will it hold? Will it slide down? Will it grip on the tree? How does the bark? Is the bark super shaggy? Is it where it'll grip on there? But just if you're using a tree stand, be well aware of that. And whatever you do, if you build one yourself, and where legal, a lot of guys use those old wooden stands. Nails over time, when that tree grows, nails will pull through the wood. They get weak. Them old tree stands were, old timers used them. I know people are going to say, and I used them when I was a kid, but you were fearless when you were a kid. But it's just something to be careful about. Just don't see and assume that it's safe if you have a homemade tree stand, or legal if somebody nailed some boards in there, and we used to do it when we were kids. And but just be well aware, because tree stands, like I said, I don't use them. I just they're fun to a point, but I'm getting too old now and I get a little nerve-wracked about them. But just be well aware, these quite a bit of ice can form, even if it's raining and the temperature drops and you're going to descend down that tree. Be aware of that. And what I used to do in my tree stands was, when I'd climb up and finally seat it down, I would take an extra ratchet strap and put it around the back and strap it in place, so that platform couldn't invert and I couldn't drop down out of that tree. So even though I was tied in, I wanted all the extra protection that I could get. And it takes a little time, but falling out of a tree is no joke. You land the wrong way, you could be 5 feet up in that tree. If you land and hit your neck the wrong way, you're paralyzed for life. And it doesn't have to happen. These accidents do not have to happen. You're supposed to be having fun, so just be well aware of that. All right, folks, here's another prime example. You see this hill behind me? Dry leaves, when you're walking on them, can be like ice. You can, especially if you don't have the right boots on, which I have very flat soles for stalking and things, but you're walking up a hill like that, you will be surprised how slippery these leaves are. And there was a situation where you have to remember, the most dangerous people are you and your partner, because more than likely, if there's going to be an accident, it's going to probably be between you or your partner, because you're together, and statistics have shown that. But what you have to realize is, just if you're carrying, especially if you're carrying a gun, and if the safety's off, if your finger should never be near that trigger. you should always have that muzzle pointed at the ground. There was a situation where, I don't believe it was a hill like this, but I think it was a pothole or something, where a young hunter was walking with his gun, tripped and fell, and in front of him, I believe, was his stepfather. And the gun fired and killed that man. Now that poor kid has to live with that for the rest of his life. That's something that was preventable. Walking in line with people, wouldn't recommend it. Especially if you're well versed and you have your muzzle always pointed at the ground, because with a gun, the rule is do not point that muzzle, whether you have the finger on the trigger or not, when you're going to shoot at anything you do not want to destroy. That gun should never be even unloaded. I can move the action, keep that gun unloaded. You have to get it in your mind. Don't even put it in any direction towards another human being, or in an unsafe direction of any sort, whether it's a human or near a house, anything. That muzzle is either at the ground or straight up. There's no holding it like this in between, unless you're on a deer, but you still have it on a 45 down where you can shoulder. But if that gun should discharge, it will go down. And like I said, it could be just a dumb mistake. You're walking and you slip in the mud, and the guy in front of you, you miss, and you just go to grab the gun and hit the trigger on accident. So these are hazards to watch out for, and they're simple hazards. Something like this, you could be walking up the hill and your partner in front of you, you slip on them leaves and go out on your back, and that gun goes and boom. There's different scenarios. So what I would recommend is, if you're in a situation where there's a hill or slippery terrain, don't walk like that where that could happen. Either that, let the one person go up first and you go up behind him after he moves off to the side, or walk side by side. Anything you could do to avoid being in that situation where, even if your gun was pointed at the ground and you slip up this way and your legs go out from under you, that gun doesn't pop up and fire in that direction. So, and even for bow hunters, make sure your most modern quivers and modern archery equipment have protection for your broadheads. So that's usually not an issue now, but just think about that. Think about things that could mess you up, So but that's a prime example right there, or if it's a muddy area where there's unstable footing. So just keep that in your mind, So hopefully this will never ever happen to anyone in their lifetime. So that's a good tip to remember. First of all, folks, can you believe it's February? I mean, we're out here filming today, and it's February, and it's 60-some degrees. This is beautiful. But we're here. I just want to show you a prime example. I know I have some other videos with it, but I totally believe that young hunters should start on the ground first. That's just my opinion. If you're a dad and taking your son or daughter out, you may want to put them in a tree stand. That's as a father or a mother, that's up to you how you want to bring your children into hunting. But if you're somebody, maybe your parents don't hunt. I've had kids to me, my dad and mom don't hunt, or my uncle doesn't hunt. What do I have to do? Well, that's what I would recommend until you really get your feet wet, as I said before. And this is a prime example. All this heavy cover behind me provides, as I've said in my other videos, natural cover that you can hunker down in. And during the off season, like today, you could put a deer target, I'll show you in a minute, way down, as long as it's safe, where there's no, like I was talking about before, and you can practice just like you're in a hunting scenario, and sit on your little seat and just pretend it was a deer that walked out, and just put the drawback motion and shoot, and practice in this heavy cover. And I'm going to show you that heavy cover. I mean, you look all through these little scrub pines and things here. You can go up and trim a little area by those logs over there if you wanted to, and make that like your spot, and just get in there in those logs, in that little log jam, and just get on the ground and sit and put a deer target out during the off season, and that'll be a good deal. And you could just get in these little thick areas, and you could really try to, if the deer are in the area, obviously, or if you're allowed to bait, if you put bait out or something. But there's plenty of little hiding spots in this thick cover, and you have to trim out a shooting lane, and that's very important too. Get some clippers So this way your arrow doesn't deflect and potentially wound the deer, or the arrow deflects, like I said before, and goes and strays through the woods. But here's a nice little thick area here where you could possibly trim out some lanes and make a little blind or something if the deer obviously are in the area. So there's a tip for you. All right, folks, here's a tip for young hunters out there. Not so much a safety tip, but as far as hunting deer when you first start, I try to get close as possible. With a compound bow and a crossbow, obviously your distances are longer. What I found with a recurve or a longbow is deer will do what they call jump the string, where the sound of the string making that thud, they react right away and could alter the impact of that arrow by the time the arrow gets there. So the closer you are, try to limit your shots, and it makes you a better hunter because you're only interacting with that deer at a short distance, and your blood really gets pumping and it's really exciting. But I shot at deer already. I learned a lesson. I was proficient at about 25 yards, took a shot, and the arrow was going right where it's supposed to be, but because that deer reacted, they can duck and turn and move, so that arrow where it's supposed to go behind the shoulder now impacted in another area, which in turn wounded the deer. That's a scenario where I don't want to have happen. So that's where you want to make sure that they're so close, especially with that recurve and longbow. That's me. I like to be right there, so this way there's no room for error. I shot a deer one time at my hunting camp that literally was going right towards the lungs, and it spun around the opposite way, and it hit it in the femoral artery in the ham. And it was just an amazing, lucky shot for me, or lucky way the deer positioned, because it was going right for the lungs, and deer just spun right around, and lucky it did just the right way, and that deer died within seconds, but it hit totally different area than I was aiming for. So close shots in bow hunting, especially for a beginner, unless you get a little bit more advanced and you get into the modern compound, or you get into the crossbows, if that's what you like to do, then it changes the game a little bit. But just just concentrate on your hunting skills, being between you and the deer. Don't necessarily go the easiest route, but but whatever works for you. You know what I mean? It's just these are just recommendations, and sometimes, like I said, if you're a young hunter, you won't have the patience to do it that way, and you may lose interest. So I can see the other side of the coin too. So but as long as you're out there having fun. But there's just things to think about. These are just things I'm putting out there just to put around in your head, just to try to think of your particular situation. But yeah, I just like I said, all the time, get out and have fun, and just enjoy life and enjoy the outdoors. Well, folks, I hope you got something out of this video. You old-timers all know this stuff, but this was mainly for the new hunters out there who are just starting out and just say, people come up to me all the time, I want to go hunting. What do I have to do? Well, you have to pull back a little bit and learn first. Before you put a firearm or bow and arrow in your hands, you got to really be proficient with that weapon, and before you even go into the woods. Or if you want to go hunting, go with somebody without a weapon and watch how it's done, and then take your time and be proficient with your weapon over time before you get into the woods, which is is obvious. But this was for the new hunters out there. Just little things that you pick up along the way that could prevent a tragedy. What I mean? Something as simple, like I said before, something as simple as tripping and with your gun, you could avoid just a terrible tragedy. So that's what I'm hoping to do. Just throw some tips down there, and when you're out in the woods, you're supposed to have fun, and there's just things that you have to keep in the back of your mind, that you're so excited about hunting, you may not think about them, or you're rushed to get to your stand, or you're you want to get in, you're thinking about deer, you're thinking about getting a big buck, but safety's taking a back seat. Once you review this stuff in your head, it becomes automatic after time. So I hope you guys got something out of this, and ladies, and good luck hunting out there, man. Just have fun. Well, that's all for Eric Funk's Vintage Sportsman this episode. I just want to say, if you get a chance, introduce a kid to the outdoors, or take a kid hunting or fishing or trapping. There was a guy who did that for me. Many people have done that for me. He gave me magazines and books and took me into the outdoors. So hopefully it will inspire the next generation.